Hello, and thanks for listening to Forward, a podcast about the compelling stories, important issues, and memorable art that move us. My name is Mari.
And my name is Christopher.
Thanks for joining us this week.
Today, we're talking about how to deal with stress, and that even though most of us learn from the earliest age how to calm ourselves, most adults are really unequipped to deal with the stress. But before that, we're going to kick things off with our Article Forward segment, where we share stories that made us think this week. Mari, want to get us started?
Yeah, so usually each of us will share one article that we found recently that was interesting, but a story came out in The Guardian today that was just so mind-blowing and such a huge story that we wanted to just dedicate our entire link forward to this story. It's called "I Made Steve Bannon's Psychological Warfare Tool. Meet the Data War Whistleblower." And I will let Christopher take it away.
So, like Mari said, this article was just published this morning, and it does seem silly to really recommend people read anything else. It tells this long and complex story that really spans continents, but at its core, though, it's a story about this propaganda company called Cambridge Analytica. And this little-known company has this breakthrough data modeling and psychological profiling algorithm, and it's pretty much built on stolen Facebook data. It used this algorithm and its entire propaganda infrastructure to run an information warfare campaign for years on behalf of powerful players in the Republican Party, like Steve Bannon. And it was Steve Bannon who actually hired Cambridge Analytica in 2014. At the heart of this story, actually, is Chris Weil, who left Cambridge Analytica 4 years ago. At the age of 24, he essentially built the company and its entire data modeling algorithm that was eventually used to sway the 2016 election and other democratic processes like with Brexit. And in the Guardian article, Chris is telling his story to really shed a light on the powerful propaganda tool that Cambridge Analytica is wielding on behalf of pretty dangerous people. And I'll admit, the article does really read like a spy thriller, and I'm barely even scratching the surface. So definitely go check out the link in the SoundCloud description. In the article, there's actually a video of Chris talking to the reporter. That's actually the best way in. He gives a nice, concise summary of the whole story before you go read the whole article. And just in case you're wondering, this whole information warfare campaign, it's actually done separately from all the Russia interference in the 2016 election. So there's just really a ton to unpack.
Yeah, it's a really crazy story. It's definitely worth checking out that story in The Guardian.
And next up is the main segment of our podcast, which we call Forward Thinking. In this segment, we dig deeper into one topic that's been on our minds this week. And this episode, the topic of discussion is how people deal with stress and how that changes from the moment we're born till we're full-grown adults on our own. While there's a lot of education and support when we're infants and toddlers to help us soothe ourselves and deal with discomfort, there's this point at which we're expected to be able to regulate our emotions on our own. But do adults really have any clue how to do this, at least in a fairly healthy way? Mari, to get us started, I think maybe it's helpful for you to explain how people soothe themselves when they're infants and how that starts to change as they grow up.
So, anybody thinking of a baby soothing themselves automatically thinks of the pacifier, sucking the thumb, being rocked, being swaddled, all of that. And all of those things are ways that infants calm themselves and soothe themselves. And when they're very little, obviously adults have to do that for them. They have to swaddle them, they have to rock them, they have to give them the pacifier. But as infants get older, they start realizing that they can put the pacifier in their own mouth, or they can suck their own thumb, or a lot of babies will stroke their own face, or play with their hair, or do other things, kind of like play with their hands. And those are things that they do intentionally to help calm themselves either because it feels good or it distracts them from whatever is causing them distress, or if they're tired or they're just uncomfortable or they're hungry, whatever it is. It just helps them deal with whatever stress or discomfort they're feeling. And then, as they get older, obviously, the parents start wanting to take the pacifier away and start, having them not suck their thumb anymore. And the idea is that they should be able to calm themselves without these external measures. The problem that I've seen, though, is that there's not a lot of work going into teaching young children how to calm themselves and how to comfort themselves without these external measures. But, what we were kind of talking about is that this lack of being able to regulate yourself from within shows up in adulthood, obviously, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, really, you have this point at which you're a kid and you go from help from your parents to being able to do it on your own. And with that transition, you go from external sources to your own internal solutions, which is mostly using your mind to calm yourself down. But there's also this strange part where I feel like as a kid, I was mostly motivated out of fear of punishment, and not from my family or anything like that, but in school. Because where do you act up the most? It's in school. And I'm trying to think of my techniques as I was a young kid. I really can't think of anything that I used. And I would say most kids and even most adults are in the same situation. Like if you asked me, like, what are the 5 things you do in any given situation if you're stressed? I'm probably going to say, like, go on my phone, snack, watch something on TV,
have a beer.
Like, I don't know if I would have something healthier to say that I do commonly.
Right. And, even with kids, like you were talking about behavior, and there's definitely a distinction to be drawn between controlling your behavior and regulating your emotions, even though obviously they're related. But yeah, a lot of what we focus on with kids is controlling and regulating behavior, because that's what we can see and that's what causes problems for adults is the behavior. And so we'll punish kids, and we talked about this in the last podcast, but the kids get punished and they have these like negative reinforcers or whatever to prevent them from behaving in certain ways, when in a lot of situations the behavior comes from emotions, and we're not teaching how to regulate the emotions themselves. And like what I mean by that is teaching kids to identify what their emotions are, like in the moment, what they're feeling, and understanding ways that they can turn their minds to other things, or, calm themselves by, like self-talk or, mindfulness or breathing techniques. We're basically just saying, don't do this behavior, and whatever you need to do in your mind to not do this behavior, do it.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's totally it. And I think that's definitely an important distinction, where it's about regulating behavior, not your emotions. And to bridge that gap, having to know what emotion you're experiencing. I don't know any even like teenagers who are thinking that way. And I'm at least trying to think of myself as a teen. And if I was stressed, like I would know I'm stressed or I'm bothered or I'm angry. And if there was another human that was the source of that anger, then I would immediately know, I'm pissed because of this person. But if I was just riled up, because there were too many things going on, I don't even know if I was equipped enough to be like, oh, I just need to extract myself from this situation. And it's actually timely we're talking about this, because right before this podcast, I got totally overwhelmed. There was just like too many things going on. We were trying to set up these mics. I was trying to transfer this file. I was trying to write something down. I got a text from someone, and I was just like, you know what? I need to get away from this situation. And it's funny because, and I told you this before we left, I'm still just an ape. Like, I got away from this situation and I kind of relaxed and calmed myself down. But the other thing I did is I got a piece of chocolate. And in between doing just like a little breathing and getting the piece of chocolate, I mean, honestly, the piece of chocolate made me feel better than the breathing did. And
Yep.
I don't know if that's a healthy thing or just chocolate's great.
Well, that's the thing is, I do think that we, at least I don't know in this country, we're kind of taught to find external things to distract us from our discomfort and to things to make us feel better physically, and then that is supposed to make us feel better mentally and emotionally. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There are things that are more serious issues that it would, long term, it would be beneficial to deal with, in an emotional and an intellectual and mental way, rather than dealing with, through substances or through, some kind of like consumption of media or whatever. That's how we as adults deal with stuff.
Yeah, and really the only way, if you've grown up and let's say you're 20 plus now, the only way you're going to learn that kind of stuff is if you go to therapy, where you're going to get someone who is helping you unpack your emotions and why you feel certain ways about certain things, because you can't even begin to solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is and what's causing it.
For sure.
And I think it's complicated by the fact that media is so readily available and it's so comforting. I'm even thinking about my bedtime routine where I'm kind of just winding down from the day and I need to sleep. I'm literally just like a baby, right? Because you need to soothe a baby before they can go to sleep. And my soothing routine as a big baby before I go to sleep is I go on Facebook for 10 minutes. And after that, I'm just like, no, I'm ready to sleep.
Yep.
I never stop and think like, why am I still super stressed out even though I'm about to go to sleep? It's probably because I've been playing video games for an hour, and that's probably the better thing to change. But you know what? Just that Facebook break maybe does it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and if you think about it, even adults even kind of engage in that sort of like, they call it non-nutritive sucking, which is what babies do when they suck their thumb or they suck a pacifier. Like if you have your iced latte or your water bottle or, whatever, it's like it's this little thing to suck on and it's comforting.
Well, and ever since I knew we were going to talk about this, I kind of spent the last week of my time like noticing my behavior more than I normally would. And so like I get to work in the morning, and the first thing I do when I get to work, I eat a little bit of my lunch because I'm like entering this state of distress, and it's not that like work is stressful or scary, but it's obviously more distressing than my trip on the train or sitting on the platform. So like I eat a little bit of my dessert and then it's like I'm ready for the day.
There
And
you
if
go.
I get stressed when I'm at work, I'm like fidgeting with my pencil.
Yep.
Just like anything to kind of distract me. Or if I get some scary new assignment, the first thing I do is I'll go check TechCrunch for 5 minutes. Like I need to steel myself and distract myself. And then after 5 minutes, I'm like, I'm ready to handle this scary assignment.
For sure.
And no, go on.
And we're always trying to come up with new like little external things to deal with our stress and like merchandise it, right? Like I feel like when we were younger, those like stress balls were a thing.
Yeah.
And now obviously like fidget cubes and all that stuff, and like now gravity blankets are becoming popular and stuff like that. But all that stuff is external, and even just like, they talk about retail therapy, like buying stuff just makes you feel better momentarily. It kind of distracts you from whatever you're stressing about or you're upset about. And like all of that, it's like sucking your thumb when you're a kid. It makes you feel better in the moment. But obviously it doesn't, solve any like deeper issues, and hopefully little kids don't have deeper issues, so that it's okay for them to suck their thumb. But as they do get older and they get more complex emotions and they have to actually deal with like social situations, it is important to give them tools and strategies, and also to help them understand what they're feeling. And that's what I'm starting to see more now in certain early childhood circles, where if a kid is upset, you kind of take them aside and say, what you're feeling right now is anger. And, I think maybe this is why, like, do you want to talk about it? And, you kind of get them to label what they're feeling and talk about what they're feeling. And then you can help them work through it and give them strategies of how to work through it without like hurting somebody or, just kind of spiraling into more and more anger. And you need to do that because otherwise, either they just kind of keep internalizing this anger and it just, turns into something more dangerous, or they just withdraw, start to, turn off their emotions entirely to feel nothing, just zone out. And that's not good either.
Yeah, I mean, to pretty much rephrase what you just said, in anytime you're encountering danger, whether it's in the wild or you're stressed, which is in your mind, you have your fight or flight instincts. And taking flight is essentially looking at Facebook, doing something else, eating your lunch right away when you get to work. To actually confront the emotion, I mean, it's very difficult, especially if you don't know what it is. That's the first step. And like a lot of the times, there's mostly nothing you can do. I'm even thinking of the train ride, which actually is stressful. Like I'm jammed in with a bunch of other people. And usually what I would do is I would just kind of go on Facebook and just be like, I need this train ride to be over because someone's breathing down my neck. And like now what I do, I just like close my eyes and I take a couple deep breaths. I'm just like, it'll be done soon. I have to surrender this power, like this problem to the ether because there's nothing I can do. And that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's, the idea behind all these meditation apps that are out now.
Yeah.
Is that mindfulness. And I think that, obviously like it's been appified now, so it's whatever. But I do think that learning how to meditate and learning to be mindful is probably obviously, and like we were talking about with therapy, therapy is sort of like an assisted meditation, right?
Yeah.
That is seems to be long term the ideal way to deal with your stress and deal with your negative emotions is to be able to use the powers of your mind,
Yeah, and that idea of being mindful, it's like you said, it's quantified to me in an app. And I was thinking yesterday or something, I'm like, well, God, what did people do before this app? And I'm like, you know what they did? They prayed.
Yeah.
And I was reading this other article before this, and like, really, prayer is the oldest form of meditation because at the end of the day, what are you doing when you're praying? A lot of the times you're asking for help or just the strength to deal with something, and you're turning your concerns over to a higher power. And when you meditate, you're letting your concerns just go to the wind. At least in the case of being more mindful. And I think there's probably no coincidence that we're becoming a more secular country, that people are wondering what to do. And, before it was, what do? You smoke a cigarette. You feel great. You feel great for like 10 minutes. And then next time you get stressed, you smoke another cigarette. But you know what? Now I can't smoke cigarettes. I can't pray. What am I going to do? I'm going to use Headspace, the app, and just solve all my problems.
There you go. Not to equate smoking with praying. But,
yes.
Or to say that, that, religion is the answer or anything. But, I think that probably originally the purpose of prayer was more a meditative thing rather than a like asking God to give you something, which I think is how a lot of people, not to stereotype, but I think like some people in the modern sort of capitalistic age might see prayer that way. Well, and that's not necessarily helpful to your mental state.
Well, and even when you're asking God for something, aren't you really asking for something that you don't have the power to solve? So like whether you want like a switch or you want someone to be cured of a disease or to get help with hardship, either way, it's a problem that you need solved that you can't do on your own. Otherwise, you would do it. And so many times, just like even before this podcast, when I was stressed, I'm like, I can't solve this problem because that would mean doing 4 tasks at once. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to take a step back and do one thing at a time.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, I've been trying to do that more lately. Like, it's because it's so easy when you got a lot going on to just let the fear of just being completely overwhelmed, overwhelm you, and just you become consumed by that, and you just start thinking like, I can't do anything. I'm a failure. I'm just never gonna get through this. And like I'm in grad school right now, and that's something that comes up a lot for me. And so I'm starting to, really try to just sit. Like if I feel that way, I just like sit and have a quiet moment and say, it's okay. Like this, it's not a big deal. Like I can get this done and I can get this done. And even if I don't get it done, I'm not going to die. So, it's all right. Just like identifying the thoughts and saying like, this thought is stressing me out and it doesn't have to.
Well, yeah, definitely putting everything in context, and just the simple notion of I don't need to do everything right now. I only need to kind of do one thing or nothing helps a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this sounds silly, but I'm a 39-year-old man.
No, you're not. You're 29.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm a 29-year-old man, and that idea of just I only need to do one thing at a time kind of like just occurred to me within the last year. And I think a large part of that is in school and so many other places leading up to that, you're taught you need to do everything. If you don't do everything we're asking of you, you're a failure.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the best grade. And then when you're out of school, you're in work and everyone's giving you these things to do. And it's just like you don't have the option of doing one thing. You need to do everything or you failed today. You didn't do exactly what we asked. And so no wonder then when you're in your free time and you come home from work and you're like, I need to wash the clothes, I need to make dinner, I need to clean the house. If you don't do all those things, your first reaction is, I failed my evening.
Yeah.
And that's a toxic mentality.
Yeah, it's just, it's that capitalist mindset of you need to be productive at all times, like in order to, I don't know, feed the work machine and get as much money as possible and whatever. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, no, that is absolutely what we're teaching people, is that if you are not being productive, or if you don't want to work for any period of time, you're lazy. And if you're lazy, you're worthless.
Well, and that's really why the problem is so complicated. So kind of just bringing it back to almost the beginning, when you're an infant, you're taught a few kind of basic set of skills, but then as you grow older, you're expected to be weaned off those and know more. But even when you're being taught, you're kind of just thinking about your behavior, not your true emotions. And then that gets compounded later with just the pressures of adulthood and the need to constantly be productive and the constant need to deliver and not fail and to meet expectations. Like, no wonder everyone is stressed out, and no amount of fidget spinning will save you.
For sure. And I think the other thing is that you're going along with that, the constant need to be productive and this like work, capitalist mentality, is that for some reason, this idea has come about that because humans can control some instincts and can control like behaviors, that we can control all of our instincts and all of our behaviors. Like, you don't really need 8 hours of sleep, just like keep yourself up and like sleep less and you'll get more done. Like, you don't need to, eat 3 times a day, like, just skip breakfast or whatever. You like, you don't want to work out, just do it, just work out. Like, and people don't really work that way. Like you were saying before, I'm just an ape. Like we're just animals, and we can control our behavior to a certain extent, but there are still certain things that we need as animals. We need a certain amount of sleep, and we need like leisure time, and we need to be active, and just like there's certain, and you need to eat you need to eat a certain amount, you need to drink a certain amount of water, and you can't control when you go to the bathroom. You know what I mean? Like there's just certain things that we can't control about our bodies and our biology. But the idea is that you should be able to. And I think that might be part of why we're not really taught how to, regulate our emotions and help ourselves feel better, because the idea is that, well, you should just feel better. Don't feel that way.
Yeah, I think it's also complicated too by everyone has a different reaction to different situations. So some things that might not stress me out greatly stress out someone else. So I can't even begin to help someone because in my mind I'm like, yeah, it's a piece of cake, no problem.
Right.
Whereas someone else, when they get to work, they just kind of get some water and get started. I'm like snacking and like getting like indulging in chocolate just to shift my mindset for the day. Someone's probably like, what the heck is this kid doing?
Yeah, just get to work. What's wrong with you?
Just get to work. Why are you eating chocolate pretzels? It's like, because I want them.
I need them.
And so it's difficult to teach people the right tools when you don't even know what they need in the moment.
For sure. And I think also so much, I mean, obviously, everything that we do is influenced by the society that we live in, and most people are not going to do things that aren't socially acceptable. So it's not socially acceptable as an adult to suck your thumb in public. It's just not something that we do. It is socially acceptable to have a Frappuccino from Starbucks and suck on it all day. Totally fine. It's socially acceptable to go out for drinks. Well, depending on who you are, where you live, what your context is. But, for a lot of mainstream America, it's totally socially acceptable to go out for drinks, one or more times a week. And that's a way that people have developed to sort of communally make themselves feel better, when they're stressed out, even though, long term it may not be the best solution for the things that are stressing you out, but it's a socially acceptable way that we've developed where, it's something that makes a lot of people feel better, and it's not seen as something that's unacceptable for adults to do.
Well, and obviously it's unfortunate that just because I want to, I can't change society and change the world. I will say that one of the most helpful things is just whenever you're in discomfort or distress as an adult, just like taking a moment to think about why you're feeling a certain way and trying to solve it in whatever way you can, whether it's kind of taking a step back from the situation, taking a deep breath, or just kind of letting it go to the air and to the wind, because there's nothing else you can do to dwell on it or just to push it down or distract yourself. It's great to do sometimes because you can't solve every problem in the moment, but long term it doesn't get you anywhere.
For sure. And there was this thing I was reading about this recently where it was saying that the best ways to, or like kind of sort of the most healthy way to be in terms of your like regulating your emotions is not to have one like specific strategy that's the best way, but it's to be flexible and to have lots of different strategies available. So like be knowing how to be mindful, knowing how to meditate, and having people that you can go to talk to about things. And yeah, occasionally maybe you just have a drink, just to relax, or like you have a piece of chocolate to relax. But if your primary or only way of coping with things and making yourself feel better is through drinking or through eating or through watching TV, then you're obviously that's how like addictions form and stuff like that. So it's just important to be in touch with yourself and kind of seek out lots of different ways to help you manage your stress and manage your emotions. And I think meditation is something that maybe a lot of people haven't tried or don't know much about, but just that, like you said, like that mindfulness is something that I think is important for everyone to at least be aware of and practice a little bit. And I hope that we start teaching that more to young kids and older adults and teenagers as well.
I have nothing else to add.
Cool. I hope I didn't stress you out too much. You have to go eat some chocolate.
Always. Always. All right. So the final segment of our podcast is called Watch List. And in this segment, we recommend one TV show or movie that's flying beneath the radar but is worth checking out. And this week, we're actually recommending a new documentary series on Netflix called Dirty Money. And so what it is a 6-part series where basically hour-long mini documentaries highlighting one evidence or example of corporate greed or malpractice on behalf of a big business in the financial sector. And I'm only a couple episodes in, but already it has the markings of a show I know I'm gonna love. It actually comes from the documentarian who did the documentary on Scientology a couple years ago on HBO called Going Clear. And I think this really ties in well to the topic of discussion we were talking about earlier in terms of the Guardian article and Cambridge Analytica, where you have these large, powerful individuals and corporations who sometimes aren't even doing something that's against the law, but it is highly unethical. And there is and and really that's happening everywhere. And what I can appreciate about this documentary, if nothing else, is it's a way that even if people get off the hook, we still didn't forget. And I think the media in its own way helps to keep people accountable and keep people aware. So if you're like me and love learning more about big corporations that are doing bad things, this might be something you'd enjoy.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. That's about it for us. If you enjoy this podcast, just search FWD, that's forward, in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We are now also on Google Play Music, or you can subscribe to Forward on SoundCloud.com.
And if you ever have any questions, thoughts, or topic suggestions, you can send us an email at forwardpodcast@gmail.com. That's fwdpodcast@gmail.com. Goodbye for now.
Bye.